Good afternoon and welcome to this week's construction clinic. If it's your first time joining us, we're really pleased to have you with us, and if it's not, welcome back. My name's Nina. I'll be doing a short housekeeping presentation, an introduction to the ICCP, and then handing over to our presenters for today's questions. So on your screen, you should see a control panel. There's not too much for you to worry about here. Today, as you know, is all about your questions. You'll see a question box here. If you do have questions, please send them through the question box. The only thing we ask is if you are sending a question, please make sure you send it through in one complete message. It just helps me to field it across to the presenter and manage the questions as we run through. So the ICCP, what is the ICCP? Well, we are a professional members organisation and we recognise those with skills, qualifications and expertise in the professional management of claims. We've got three main objectives, and those are to establish international professional standards for the management of claims, to give recognition to those who have gained the appropriate knowledge and experience in the management in claims, and also to help and educate those who would like to gain this experience. Membership. So we offer three levels of individual membership: associate member and fellow. I'm not going to go into the details today, but you'll find all of the information on our website. Each level comes with a certain set of prerequisites which must be met, and we also offer concessionary fees for residents in certain countries internationally. So do check out the fees, check out the prerequisites and see if you would qualify to join. Okay, so for the past couple of weeks, we've been highlighting some of the benefits of membership. Last week, we focused on the webinar element, and this week, we'd like to mention the practical templates. As a member, you would have access to your private members area, and within there, as well as articles, knowledge papers, technical content, you'll also find a section for templates. And those templates are designed to help you refine your claims administration and management skills and are available to download to use on your projects. Some of the templates that we have at the moment include a full claim document, prolongation cost calculations, timeline, notice register, etc. So just to give you an example of what those look like, we've got one of the templates on screen for you here. So this is the claim document template, which we could argue is the big one that we should be using. So you have the cover page and the main details of your claim. You'll have a contents page with the main sections, which would be should be concluded in a professional document. Spaces for any other sections which you would need to include depending on the circumstances of your claim. We then go into the executive summary, and here in blue you will see an overview of the type of content that should go into a good executive summary. And if we scroll down a little bit here, we have the statement of claim, and again some details of what should go here. And then we get into definitions, abbreviations and clarifications. The contract particulars, and so on and so on. Now, a second example we'd like to show you today is the prolongation cost calculation. So a simple spreadsheet. Here we've got the summary. So for example, if we look at the site management, supervision and staff costs, we've got the total cost here, but then we've also got these sub-sheets at the bottom to back those costs up. So if we stick with staff, if we go across to salaries, we'll then see all the salaried staff on the project, their annual salaries, and then the costs broken down into daily costs. And then you'll find similar sheets for establishment, transport, plant, equipment, etc., etc. So those are just a couple of examples of the templates that you can find in the members area, again, downloadable to use on your projects. If any of that appeals to you and you'd like to find out more, please visit the ICCP website. You can also get in touch with me. I'm happy to answer any questions and provide more information. Yeah, all of the details are up there on the site. Okay, so on to today's panelists. Today we've actually got Paul Gibbons, ICCP President, and Lise Ball, ICCP Fellow and Steering Committee Member. So now I'd like to hand over to Paul, who's going to kick the clinic off for us today.
Thanks, Nina. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all okay. Good to see you all, and thanks for joining us today on this webinar. There's a couple of so there's three questions that Lee and I are going to be dealing with today. I'm going to be dealing with one question in particular, and then I'm going to go on to talk about the records that should be being maintained. It's something that we've been asked to do and advise on quite a bit. But the first question that we need to deal with is from a chap called Roy Gopinthan. And Roy has asked this question: what is the meaning of thickening in a typical prolongation claim, and how should it be claimed for? So just to deal with that, the thickening calculation is all around the resources, the plant, the labour that the company, the contractor, needs to be recovering. And the way you go about it is, ideally what you should be doing is identifying what your planned labour and plant look like in your tender, in your allowances, and produce a histogram of that, ideally. And then what you should be doing is comparing that to your actual resources that you utilised. And the idea being is to produce a planned versus actual graphical representation of what resources you had on a labour and plant basis compared to what your planned intent was. And where the thickening is where you have more actual resource than what you plan to have. And that might well be because you could have possibly been under recovering in your tender, you might have got your allowances wrong, or you might have suffered additional plant, additional labour to carry out additional variation work or to deal with claims. And the idea being is to link that thickening back to the periods of delay and back to the records that are being maintained to support the calculations. And what you would also then need to do is to work through the cost calculations and align that accordingly back to the thickening and the histogram part of the claim. So, as I say, with regards to thickening, it's all about demonstrating what you had planned on site from a resources perspective against what you've actually had, compare and contrast, align that back to your periods of delay and your entitlement, and then the cost should flow from that. So hopefully, Roy, that's answered that question. If you want to have any more information, then please let me know. I'm more than happy to provide information on that. Moving on then to the element of records. In this current pandemic, we're being asked by quite a few of clients, how do we maintain records and what should the records look like? Because you haven't got individuals on site currently that are maintaining the records. The camps, labour camps are shut, project camps are shut due to the COVID-19 being within them. And therefore, how do they effectively capture the records? Well, always a difficult question. What does good record keeping look like and how should it be maintained? But the first thing I would suggest is you need to be looking at both on and off-site record keeping. So where you've got actual physical works going on, you're maintaining your on-site records, and we'll go on to that in a minute. But similarly, you might have off-site matters going on regarding material supply, regarding off-site design, regarding off-site manufacture. You should be also maintaining those kind of records as well, particularly around if those matters are causing delay and frustration to your works. Okay, moving on then to what does a good record look like? For me, good records are where you say what you plan to do and you record what you actually did, referencing cause and effect of any changes and demonstrating the employer and contractor culpability. It's more than likely that productivity is likely to be reduced, and we've seen that over here in the UK. We've got clients that are coming to us and saying we need to rejig our program, taking into account the COVID-19 effects, and that's adding tremendous amounts of time to programs that they had already been working to. We often find that contractors' labour records are usually quite poor, and we need to work with them on how they can improve that. Because at the end of the day, he who asserts has to prove, and it's only your good contemporaneous records that are there to maintain, that need to be maintained. That is your bedrock. So looking at particular records, one would need to, in my view, look at recording change in the critical path, particularly with regards to program delays. You would be requiring, I would believe, to be updating those programs on a weekly basis, most definitely on a monthly basis, and always refer back to your contract to see what the contract says. The program records would normally consist of a baseline program, any updates to that baseline program. You might want to look at progress records as well in terms of as-built data, again, both on and off site. And those progress records need to be looking at what's actually happened, and they need to be recording factually correctly what's actually happened on your project. I would also suggest one would like to look at maintaining resource records. And these resource records should include management, obviously labour, plant, any overhead equipment, any materials. Resource records on your subcontractors. Again, we are relying upon your subcontractors to provide you information to support their claims, which ultimately will support your claims up to your client. Records around outputs and productivity, and there I'm particularly referring to measured mile record keeping. So taking an unhindered piece of contract work and comparing that to a hindered piece of contract work, and comparing if there's been any disruption or reduction on your productivity. So we have a client here in the UK that was getting in their original project, their baseline project, 0.8 in terms of their productivity allowances prior to COVID-19. Post-COVID-19, with all of the impacts of social distancing and all the health and safety provisions and PPE and all of that, that 0.8 productivity has gone down to 0.5. So, there's a tremendous amount of work still to do on this project, and the program has been elongated from completion of September this year through to August of next year. And that's the impact of having this 0.5 implemented within the program. So obviously that causes a lot of discussions to be had at site. How can we improve productivity? How can we get the program back to a completion this year as opposed to next year? So there's all those debates happening. I would also suggest that the contractors need to be looking at cost records, and indeed as an employer, you need to be looking at when you receive those cost records. What do they look like, in terms of the detail? So the level of information around labour, materials, the subcontract, indirect and overhead costs. And there's also records around the correspondence. So any emails, any letters and your notifications, really important having your notification records developed as well. Okay. So the CIOB, they have some guidelines, which is the Chartered Institute of Building. They have identified some key data that they believe should appear in project records. And just to run these past you for your benefit, they talk about identifying codes, whether that be in terms of an activity code, predominantly on the program, the activity description, the dates of records they need to be maintained, what resources have been affected and obviously recorded as well, start and finish dates of activities, who kept the record, who's going to be receiving the record, and indeed the progress update. Okay, so we're also, as well, just touching on this, we're also seeing quite a bit of technology coming in with regards to maintaining records, predominantly where individuals are not on site because of being either furloughed or they can't get onto site due to the access issues. So, how do you maintain good contemporaneous records? Well, we have clients here that use drones and they carry out drone surveys. That means that the drones can be done from a desktop in effect, and the videos are then recording site progress. That all then gets fed back into a progress report. And these records as well are dealing with, as I said before, the daily allocations, what's been happening, what was the planned intent, what actually has happened, and why has there been a delay. And you could also then extend that to having more contemporaneous marked up drawings and photographs, and as I said, video and drone footage. So there's quite a bit to talk about, but what I would say is don't go too far. Don't overcomplicate the record keeping. You've got to keep it simple. I think we've learned here over many years of doing this. You've got to keep your record information clean, concise, and to the point. And as I said to you before, if you state what you plan to do and then you verify what you've actually done, compare and contrast and why it slipped, why there's a delay, why you might have an entitlement, and you've notified it, you shouldn't go too far wrong. Just as a close out, the SCL protocol, the Society of Construction Law Protocol, they also have a list in there in terms of what record should be maintained. But what they do say quite clearly is, do not wait and see. Absolutely clear. Do not wait and see what happens. Use a contemporaneous analysis and maintain your records contemporaneously. Okay, and again, the SCL prescribes what those forms of records should look like. And finally, what if you don't have records? We have clients here that say, I haven't really got the records. Well, unfortunately, in my view, and indeed the views of the laws of the land, a party asserting a claim must, on the balance of probabilities, prove their case to a tribunal. So you need to provide as much evidence as possible to assist the tribunal or the person looking at your claim. And if this can't be achieved, then in my view, then your claim, the claimant's claim, will most probably fail. So remember, records, the C's, the cause, effect, entitlement and substantiation, and hopefully you won't go too far wrong. That comes to the end of my session on thickening and record keeping. So I'm going to hand over now to Lee, and Lee's got a couple of questions that he'll deal with. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Right, the two questions I've got. First one was from Ahmed Sadiq. He says, we have a project timeline from January 2020 till July 2020. And on the 3rd of 2020, the project was running behind schedule by 60 days and we had an extension for 30 days. A revised program was submitted with a cutoff date. A revised program was submitted with a cutoff date of March 2020, and the new completion date set to August 2020 instead of July 2020. And the contractor recovered his 30 days delay. So there was a January to July. As of March, the program was running 6 days behind. They had an extension for 30 days, issued a new recovery program showing the completion on August, which was the 30 days, and they've recovered the 30 days. We have another claim event started just after the data date of the March 2020. Which version of program update do we use to analyze the delay using a TIA method? The revised program which the contractor has delayed due to the recovery made, or the normal update on the baseline program, the revised program which shows the real contractor delay at this time. Okay. So the delay has cost 30 days and you've got an extension for that. You were forecasted an additional 30 days, but you've issued a program and you've recovered that. So now you've mitigated that 30 days of potential delay. The revised program is the program you're going to use going forward. If that program was unachievable, then you shouldn't have issued it. You shouldn't, because the fact you've issued a revised program, you've said you can complete, you've mitigated that other 30 days, and you're going to complete the 30 days EOT. So now that program is the basis for any future delays and progressing, not all the normal update of the baseline program. The revised program should be the normal update from now on. There should be no other program. So in answer to the question of which program do you use that revised program going forward. That's that's the full question there. So yes, the revised program. and make sure you can complete by that time. If you can't achieve the date, show the program, make the program show when you can complete. Okay, the second question we have is from Abed. Okay, Abed's got a list of bullet points, and they start off with: the client issued a site instruction for additional works. The contract's original finish time was the 16th of March. The variation order was issued at the end of February, and the details were issued by the client on the 3rd of March, so 13 days before completion. We submitted our revised program calculations and shop drawings on the 15th of March and asked for a time extension of 35 days. Later, the client issued the extension of time and later on rejected to pay the contractor's associated amount. The client issued the variation order details not in a reasonable time. Please advise. Right. There is some missing details here, Abed. So I'll try and answer based on what you've given. But what does the contract state in terms of time and costs and EOTs? Why did the client or the engineer reject the costs? What was his reasoning for rejecting those? You state later on, the client issued the extension of time and later on rejected. Was that after the 35 days, or? I'm not clear on that. And when did you actually finish the contract? You say you asked for 35 days extension. When did you actually finish the contract? And have any damages been applied? So in terms of the variation order, when it was issued on the 3rd of March, would you have completed by the 16th of March without that variation order? If you would have done, then it's quite clear that that variation would have delayed the works. So you should be entitled to time and relief from damages. But again, it depends what that event was and how it all worked. So where were you on progress? Were you going to complete on time? If not, if you weren't going to complete by the 16th of March and a variation order came, then from the client rejecting your costs, it looks like there could be a concurrency use here for defending the cost to be paid. So if you were going to be late on the project and the engineer comes along and gives a variation, which is additional time, but it's absorbed within the period of time you're going to complete the works by, the engineer has been maybe kind and reasonable to you by saying, okay, we'll call it concurrency, you can have the 35 days extension of time but no cost because you were going to be late anyway. So you'd really have to carry out a full analysis to see how that works. It's difficult to give you a definitive answer from the details I've got, but if you want to send anything through to Nina, we can have a look at it. And on a final point on that, you state the VO was not issued in a reasonable time. Always a big argument for a contractor. FIDIC 99 is what we're using here in the Middle East. 13.1 states that variations may be initiated at any time prior to the taking over certificate. You didn't have the taking over certificate and a variation was issued. So reasonable time, if it affects the work, then you could say, well, it's not reasonable because I now can't complete the works. But then if the client gives you an extension of time, why is it then not reasonable? So I don't think that's going to be a good argument saying it wasn't reasonable time. So I hope that answers based on what you gave me. But yeah, if you want to take it, I'm happy to answer any more specific points on that. If you send them through to Nina, then she can forward them on and we can have a further discussion on that. And that's it for my questions. So thank you for the questions. I'm back to Nina.
Thanks, Lee. We've got a few minutes to go. For anybody new to the sessions, we do try to keep it to a strict half an hour, but we've got time for a few questions that have come through. So I'm just going to go through them in the order that they've come in. Okay, question from Pratik. how do we deal with claims under a bespoke contract, and what factors should we consider?
Wow. Okay. I'll have a go at answering that one. I think we would always suggest it to be very, very careful of the bespoke conditions. I think what you need to be very mindful of is people understand what standard forms are. So with regards to the FIDIC and the JCT and the NEC, particularly around notifications and time barring clauses and what you need to do with regards to making your entitlement stick. And I think with bespoke contracts, what happens is that people don't understand what their obligations are with regards to referencing notifications and programs and all of that. And they are too busy delivering the project as opposed to having spent time understanding the nuances of the base contract that they've signed up to. And most contractors, they just want to get the job done, and they absolutely advocate that. But what happens is most construction projects don't end up the way they started. And as a result, there is often a dispute that needs to be resolved either by negotiation or through any more formal means. And that's when the sides can roll in the lawyers. The lawyers will look at the bespoke contract and they will say, well, you've not complied with that clause and therefore your entitlement falls away. It was a condition precedent, you should have known about it. And therefore the claim hasn't got any legs and the entitlement falls away. So I think for me, bespoke contracts come with a massive health warning. I don't say don't work to them, but you've got to know them more. And in any event, it's no difference to, I mean, here in the UK, we have NEC standard form contracts that get amended by the Z clauses. And what you end up with the Z clause, and it doesn't even look like a standard NEC contract at the get-go. And it makes you wonder, it makes me wonder why parties ever sign up to an NEC type of collaborative arrangement if they're going to change the risk profile so much. But there you go. That's the situation we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So that's what I've got to say on bespoke contracts. Yeah, any comments, Lee?
No, I'm good with that.
Okay, time for a couple more. Sorry if my screen keeps switching, everybody. It's how the question box keeps popping up and disappearing. Okay, question from Daniel Alcon, one of our fellows. Nice to see you, Dan. Does a baseline program have to be agreed with the client, or is it simply the program that the contractor submits in the first instance?
I'll let you answer that one, Lee. I've got a view.
Does the baseline have to be approved?
Does a baseline program have to be agreed with the client, or is it simply the program that the contractor submits in the first instance?
Thanks, Daniel. The baseline is the first program that you're going to issue for the contract. The contract asks for a baseline program so you can measure all the works against. If the baseline is not approved, then I would carry on updating that program. Paul?
Yeah, again, depending on what contract you have. I mean, the UK NEC suggests that the contractor is required to submit a program for acceptance by the project manager. Failure to do so, the sanction is a 25% reduction in the payment profile until such time that the program has been issued for and indeed accepted. Now, it may never get accepted. The program may never get accepted, and we've seen that whereby subcontractors have submitted programs to the employer that never get accepted. But as Lee says, you've issued it, you've complied with the contract. Keep using that as your baseline and updating that with progress. And obviously impacting with delays and your extension of time entitlement. So just comply with the contract. Make sure you've got a compliant program. Get it in there for acceptance, whether the employer accepts it or not. That's their gift to do or not, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Okay, right, and that takes us a few minutes past the half-an-hour mark. So I think we'll call it quits there for today. Thank you to everybody for joining. I did actually just have a couple of questions come through specifically about membership. So Vijay and Shahid, I'll drop you an email with responses to those questions. Everybody else, thank you for joining. Paul and Lee, thank you as always for your time, and we'll be back next week. So we hope to see you then. Thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.